But in your book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, you write this: I have never engaged the services of a prostitute, but I have encountered a lot of whores in my career. People and interests who sell out their nation for money, power and fame. So who is the whore in your opinion? Is it Ted Cruz or Mitch McConnell?
Well, that was with regard to people in Washington generally. You know, it was Thomas Jefferson who said, Martin. I
understand that, Mr. Klayman. I just wondered if I could take your very words, though, and ask you which of those two, Mr. Cruz or Mr. McConnell, is, in your opinion, a whore?
In terms of how I would characterize it, Mitch McConnell has sold out the American people, so I would characterize him in that group, because he does not represent the interests of the conservative movement, the libertarian movement, or for that matter, any other movement. And whether it's McConnell or whether it's President Obama or whoever, they're representing their own proper interests in Washington. And it's not the interests of the people. And that's why I said I was referring to Thomas Jefferson, is that when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. Okay. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. Right now, our grievances are not being heard by either political party, and frankly, they're all whores.
Okay, well, so you've confirmed to us that your view is that Mr. McConnell is a whore. Professor Peterson, do you think the Republican Party may yet be in danger of a major secession, with severe conservatives like Ted Cruz leading a rump of true believers? And what will that cost the nation, given that Ted Cruz almost single-handedly led the nation into default?
Well, my estimation is that we're not going to see Ted Cruz leave the Republican Party anytime soon. He wants to run for president, and I think some of the things that he's been doing recently are clear indicators of that. To be honest with you, Martin, I'd love to see 3 or 4 political parties in our system, because I think one area where Mr. Klayman and I might agree is that in D.C. there's too much money in our political system, and so they're not very representative of the American people. But to me, Ted Cruz is part of that system. He may seem to be more rebellious or revolutionary because he's affiliated himself with the Tea Party, but at the end of the day, Mr. Cruz is pretty on the straight and narrow when it comes to American politics and big money being in American politics.
Yeah. Well, let's give him credit, though, for taking a position, because there are very few people in Washington who stick their neck out.
Okay.
And Cruz did take a position that he believes in. He carried through with it. He didn't win, but he's not at the level of McConnell. I don't believe he's a whore. Let's see how he evolves over time. I can judge him yet.
Okay, well,
I wouldn't use that kind of terminology.
Mr. Klayman, speaking of people who stand by their word, last year you attempted to challenge the current president's name on the ballot, claiming that he was not a natural-born citizen. And here's a sample of what you said last weekend.
Actually, I'm still doing that, Martin.
Good, okay. And here's a sample of what you said last weekend at a rally attended by Mike Lee, Ted Cruz and Sarah Palin. Take a listen, sir.
A president,
an imperialistic president,
who bows down to Allah. This president is not a president of we the people. He's the president of his people. And to demand that this president leave town, to get out, to put the Qu'ran down, to get up off his knees, and to figuratively come up with his hands up.
Mr. Klayman, are you saying that the President of the United States is in fact a foreign-born Muslim who has hoodwinked the entire nation?
First of all, that clip, Martin, was clipped, okay? I didn't even get to finish the sentence. It was pasted together. But secondly, what I'm saying is that the President has bowed down to Arab states and other Muslim interests at the expense of the United States and Israel, and frankly our servicemen and women who can't defend themselves in Afghanistan and other war theaters because our rules of engagement don't allow them to fire unless they're fired upon first.
I understand, Mr. Klayman.
Okay.
Mr. Klayman, I really want to focus on what you said, if I may.
I'd be happy to.
What evidence do you have to support these repugnant smears and slurs? Have you asked the President if he's a Muslim? Have you observed him performing the various practices of Islam? Has he arranged for the White House to be adjusted so that it faces Mecca? Have you seen him take the Hajj? What is your evidence for making those kinds of public statements?
As a journalist and as a writer, Martin, you know that those references were metaphoric. What I'm talking about is a president. Let me finish. But they ring true, because this president has done everything he can to harm Israel. to harm American interests in the Middle East.
Mr. Klayman,
that's a fact.
When you said,
indisputable.
So what you said last weekend, if I understand you correctly, you were using metaphor what? Just to simply incite the crowd, to titillate Sarah Palin?
Just like you do.
Was it just all a rabble? Well, hang on, I've never lied about the president.
No, we're making a point. You're making a point with an audience. You're trying to get them to understand.
So what I'm asking
you... Let me finish, Martin. You have to let me finish.
Was it, Mr. Klayman, allow me to ask you the question. Allow me to ask you the question.
But then allow me to answer the question.
Was it the act of a rabble-rouser who tells lies in public just to incite the crowd? And I have to ask you, who's the whore now?
You consider them to be lies, Martin. I consider them to be truth. I suggest people read the column that's coming out tonight on worldnetdaily.com, which explains exactly what I said. And namely, this president, when he gave an interview in 2008 to George Stephanopoulos, he referred to his Muslim faith. Number two, and we don't condemn him for that, but number two, he has done everything he can to harm Israel and American interests in the Middle East. Our servicemen cannot even defend themselves properly. They're dying in record numbers in Afghanistan because they can't fire upon any enemy, jihadist enemy, for fear they're going to hurt some kind of collateral Muslim civilian population. We are not there to hurt anybody, but we're here to defend ourselves.
Professor Peterson, please, your response.
Just a few things here. You are demonizing Islam just in the framework of the metaphor that you set up in your comments. And I just want to make it clear here that in the United States, we have freedom of religion. You can practice Islam and still be the president of the United States. You may not like that, or your group might not like that, but that's the country that we live in. And I wonder, you know, Mr. Klayman, who exactly you're talking about when you're talking about the president only serves his people. I mean, are you talking about people here in the United States? Are you about people abroad? The idea that this president has somehow been the greatest supporter of Islam or of Islamic regimes in the Middle East is a little bit convoluted. I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, it's interesting.
It's like being a little bit pregnant.
If you let me finish, it's convoluted in the sense that, you know, the foreign policy that President Obama has executed over the course of the last 5 or 6 years is almost identical to the foreign policy that Mr. Bush and Cheney implemented in the United States when they were running this country.
I'm not a great fan of Bush and Cheney. Let me say this. I am a fan.
Let me finish.
Mr. Klayman, you must allow Professor Peterson to have his say.
When Bush and Cheney were prosecuting the war on terror, I did not hear your group referring to them as Muslim. I did not hear your group trying to delegitimize their presidency. And so that begs the question as to why President Obama, whose foreign policy, again, is quite comparable, if not in some ways identical to the Bush-Cheney foreign policy, why that draws the ire and also othering of this president in this kind of way in terms of the words you used about the rally.
Rather than listening to cropped quotes, which MSNBC sometimes has done, I think hopefully it'll be corrected in the future. I suggest that you read my writings.
Did you say that he was a Muslim? Did you say that this president was a Muslim?
You said
kneel down to the Quran?
That was a metaphor that he favors Arabic interests and Muslim interests over American and Israeli interests. And he is not, frankly, he's not a president in the mold of a Jefferson or an Adams who believes in the same Judeo-Christian values of our founding fathers.
Depending on what mold you want your president to be in, Mr. Jefferson was a racist. And so I don't know what mold you want your presidents to be in. But again, even as a metaphor,
I'll tell you as a racist, someone who attacked in the Trayvon Martin case, George Zimmerman, before he had a chance to be heard by a jury, and then when he's acquitted, just like Trayvon Martin was 37 years ago.
Mr. Klayman, can we just pause for a second here? You have suggested that what you said about the president was purely metaphoric, okay? And that's been your line of argument. We have not in any way misrepresented your statements. You heard
I'm not backing off what I said, Martin.
Good.
I'm not backing off.
So here's the question.
I'm saying it's metaphorical is backing off of it.
I suggest you read my column tonight on worldnetdaily.com and you'll see.
Mr. Klayman, I will read it as I have read your book, and I will take great care of it.
Thank you.
But here's a question I have.
I'll send you an autographed copy.
Mr. Klayman, here's a question I have for you. How would you defend yourself if accused of being a delusional racist whose hatred for this president is in fact a form of psychiatric pathology, an illness? I mean, how do you defend